Hi, it's Elizabeth Willits here from Investing in Women, and we're live today on Facebook and on LinkedIn. And I'm chatting today with Lynn Houmdi from the Challenges Group. We're going to be talking all about how you can return well into work after a career break. So thank you so much for everyone that is joining today. If you give us a like or an emoji, that would be fab. Let us know if you can hear us okay, any problems with sound. I'm going to be chatting today with Lynn Houmdi from the Challenges Group. I'm going to be talking all about how to return to work well after a career break and how her company and her programs can support you as well. So thank you so much, Lynn, for joining us today. It's absolutely fabulous to have you here and have a chat about this subject, fascinating subject. And you know, a lot of people have experiences of career break, trying to return to work after one as well. So yeah, if you've had any experiences of returning to work after a career break, good or bad, do let us know in the comments, and we'll try and have a read. So so before we get going, if you want to just explain to people a little about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, great. Hi everybody. So my name's Lynn Houmdi, and I am the co-creator and program manager of a program called Making Work Work for Women Returners. And I run that on behalf of a group of social businesses and charities who are based in Edinburgh, called the Challenges Group. And I'm also the founder of a Facebook community called Flexible Working Scotland. And for both of those areas of work, I was recently nominated Scotland's Flex Influencer 2022. And all of that kind of came out of my own experience of taking a career break. So I was a civil servant and diplomat for the first part of my career. And I actually took a voluntary redundancy before I became a mum. I became a mum in my early 40s, so I'd had quite a lot of career experience and life experience at that point. And I didn't really realize until I became a mum how much of my identity was kind of wrapped up in my sort of professional self, really. And so once my son was one, I kind of had enough of staying at home, and I wanted to get back into a bit more structured employment, having freelanced off and on and done bits here and there until that point. And I just realized how hard it is. And I realized that I had never really thought about how difficult it was. And I hadn't really engaged with my friends who'd had their kids earlier to learn how difficult it was. And I just had a total mental block. I couldn't even figure out how I was going to apply for jobs without childcare in place, but I didn't know how I was going to put childcare in place if I didn't know when I would be working. And I think it was a bit of a mind blown moment, and it is really hard, and nobody prepares you for it.
Is an issue because a lot of nurseries, the good ones, get full up. I mean, I've heard stories of people like booking in when they're pregnant. I think someone even said to me the other day that they'd heard instances where people were booking in, they're reserving their childcare spot when they were trying to conceive, which, you know, I didn't do that at all. But it's hard because you don't know what's available. Obviously, sometimes you can only get certain days at nursery as well because they're fully booked on other days. And yeah, you don't want to commit to a nursery place if you don't have a job, and vice versa.
That's it. And so I actually went back to university, so I sort of put all of that on hold for a couple of years.
So what did you study at university?
Islamic and Middle Eastern studies, so nothing to do with anything. But it just gave me a bit of time out, and actually gave me a means to sort of shake up my routine and start to imagine how I might build something else into my life, like work. And also gave me good grounding in some of the sort of research methods that I use now to really understand what's going on with the women that I work with, and gave me the time to really figure out that this is, you know, the issue of what I call making work work. So making work work around all the commitments and the enjoyment of life isn't something that just happens. It isn't just a difficulty for mums. but it is predominantly a difficulty for women. And it was around that time, as I was finishing my master's, that I got to know the Challenges Group, who are they're essentially a business consultancy, but they do a lot of training. They're a partner of the Chartered Management Institute. And so in 2019, we started to just sort of have conversations about how we could help more women into work, and what the sort of framework of the programme that's now making work for women returners would look like. And now the programme's funded by the Scottish Government through Skills Development Scotland, which is the skills agency in Scotland. And we've helped about 100 women so far. It's great.
Oh, yeah, brilliant. So you did that sort of following university, you joined Challenges Group.
Yeah. So at first,
clarity then to think that's what I want to do, you know, because you've done something different before university, and then you just something different again at university. I think I get a lot of messages, as you probably do. I feel a bit stuck. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I enjoy. And people are like looking for a lightning bolt, a purpose, for someone maybe to tell them what to do. But I think obviously it has to come from you. So what gave you that clarity?
Yeah, I think the women we work with, because we are essentially a social enterprise, and we sit within a network sort of physically in our location in Edinburgh, and also sort of our network is of social enterprises and charities and other third sector organisations. We work with a lot of women who are looking for something more meaningful, who are looking for something that's maybe purpose and profit. Sometimes they know they want to go and work for a charity. Sometimes they've never even imagined working for a charity, or they don't know what a social enterprise is. And I think that time when you have time out of work, whatever the reason, I mean, for most of the women I work for, it is because they become a mum, but often there's other things going on. They might have relocated, they might have had an illness, they might be menopausal, they might have disability, all sorts of things are going on. And that's often a time of reflection when women are sort of thinking, oh, actually, I don't want to go back to what I did before, or I don't really identify with what I did before. And for me, I think when I left government, I think I'd always wanted to kind of help people. But when I was in government, it felt too far removed. You know, I wasn't sort of sitting face to face with people I was helping. And just before I left the Scottish Government, I had the opportunity to go on something run by the BMW Foundation. And it was a programme for young leaders, and that wasn't yesterday. And it was all about social enterprise. And that was kind of what got me going and got me thinking about the opportunity to sort of apply business principles for good. And I think then my freelancing that I did after I took a redundancy was always sort of moving in that direction. But I'd kind of been looking for my thing, my cause. And then really it was my lived experience that kind of, you know, slapped me in the face, really. I mean, when I was in government, we had all the sort of policies and HR procedures that you could dream of around flexible working, mat leave, parental leave, you know, compassionate leave, all the things that, you know, are being talked about now, we had back then, and I didn't need any of them. You know, I was never sort of not given a job because I was a woman. I was never paid less because I was a woman. And I didn't even really appreciate back then that any of that would be an issue at any point in my life. And then it was only once I kind of left that stability and started listening to what people around me were saying, and reading and researching, I was like, oh my God, this is massive, and so few people talk about it.
Yeah, I know it is. Yeah, we've had some comments. So Claudia says, brilliant work you're doing, such a tricky transition. And Sarah says, love that you're using business principles for good. It is tricky.
It is.
We talked about like some of the barriers people might feel if, you know, they face childcare, returning to work after a career break. What other barriers do people typically face, do you think?
I think confidence is a massive one, and I think it's a bit of a dangerous one, if I'm honest, because I think there's a lot of messaging out there on social media and in the media that somehow women need to fix themselves. But actually, there are a whole load of structures that were created without women in mind. I mean, it's only since the Second World War that women have been, an ever increasing presence in the workforce. And we know ourselves that we're still the ones who are doing all the caring. We're still the ones who are looking after kids. A lot of us are looking after our elderly parents. We're most commonly the ones that follow our partners and our husbands around the world if their jobs take them abroad. And so the structures haven't really adapted to reflect the makeup of the workplace. And I think that's why women start to then feel a lack of confidence, because they're looking at a workplace and thinking, how am I going to fit back in? How am I going to find the flexible working I need or the part-time working? How am I going to find a culture that I belong in? I mean, a lot of the women I speak to, they're not really aware of the idea of workplace culture, even though it's become such a big talking point during the pandemic. And so then I think it just becomes a bit too difficult. And if it was easy, there wouldn't be a need for my program. If it was as simple as kind of leaving a job and slotting back in, it wouldn't, I wouldn't need this program. And I never fail to be staggered by the amount of talent and experience and skills and achievements of the women we work with. There's really no correlation between competence and confidence. And often the women we work with, they just need a little bit of support. And the best support is the support of other women around them, other women who are in a similar situation, who really understand. They might all have come from different backgrounds, often they're different nationalities, they've had different work experiences, but just that idea that they're not alone. So we train in small groups, and women often say to us that they felt that they were kind of facing all these challenges by themselves, and then they see women not in a room because we do it online, but on Zoom, who they think, wow, she's great, she's done this great job, or she's really clever, she's done that, and they think, oh, hang on, they see me like that. And that's what makes the big difference, I think. And I think also another challenge women face is that they don't see themselves in the workplace, especially women who have had a lot of experience. If they're looking to go back into senior roles, they don't necessarily see other women with the same juggle that they might have, or they can't really picture themselves in an organization. And then often women think, well, I'll set up something myself, I'll do my own thing. But that's quite daunting if it's something new as well. If you've never set up a business before, it's quite, as you and I both know.
There's no easy choices, but I think what helps is you sort of saying saying to each other, it's not our fault. The system was designed before women were, in that as active participants in that system. It wasn't designed for two people working with no thought about who's actually picking up everything at home. I think that is such a powerful thing to say. It's not our fault. We don't have to change the system. It has to change to better support and accommodate people's working needs today, and not just women but men as well. I've always thought that there needs to be equality at home, or there really is true equality of work, and that it's sort of a cycle, isn't it? And the more flexible working, inclusive workplaces that both genders and sexes take up, the more equality you'll have at home, etc.
Absolutely.
Claudia said she had children in her mid-40s. Staying at home with babies was much harder than her work as a lawyer, and she thinks that affects one's confidence and makes you wonder how you will juggle work and children. I think that's really true, Claudia.
Yeah, something that I've observed that I don't know, I think it's probably something for a PhD, but I think often when we become mums later in life, that process of becoming a mum is very uncomfortable, because we're so used to this professional kind of identity, and So, you know what it's like. You walk into a room and people are like, what do you do?
Yeah.
It's so much part of our society. And so we go through this very kind of bumpy transition to become mums, and suddenly, there's no annual appraisal, nobody sort of hands you a handbook, we don't know what we're doing, and it can be really
Very difficult.
unsettling. It's really hard,
Very
but then
difficult.
we get used to that, and that becomes our comfort zone,
Yeah.
and then we're faced with another kind of bumpy transition back into work. And obviously for some women there's absolutely no choice. There's a financial imperative to just get back into the workplace. And we work with a lot of women who either because they're on benefits or because they are in a relationship, don't have that financial imperative necessarily, but they just want to do something for themselves, something where they feel that they're achieving, where they're getting some positive feedback, where so they start to get a bit of that sort of identity back. But
Yeah.
it's really difficult. I think often women underestimate the challenges in that transition. It's a whole new life phase to go back in after you've had a break. And I mean, I think the longest break any of the women we've worked with has had was 17 years. It's a long time.
I think
It's a
what makes
lifetime.
it difficult is we don't have our villages anymore. There's not, people move away from where they grew up. There's often people don't have grandparents or family around the corner that can help them on this transition. So sort of navigating it all on our own. That was really emphasised in the lockdown as well. So people, it's tough, not
It
easy.
is.
Very hard. So how does your program sort of help people? So what are the people like that you typically support, and how do you help them back into work?
Yeah. So we work with women who are based in Scotland. We're funded by the Scottish Government, and we work principally with women who have management experience or aspirations. I mean, that can be any kind of management. It doesn't have to be managing big teams. And the part of the reason we do that is because we think those women have the greatest potential to then go back into the workplace and start to make change for themselves and for the people around them. But it's also because the Challenges Group is an affiliated training provider of the Chartered Management Institute. So that's a chartered institute like the others, like the CIPD or the CIM. And we really believe that better managers make for better run organizations. And so the program combines some training around positive workplace cultures, and that includes principles of management and leadership, and also managing people and performance, because we really believe that if women are going back into the workplace, even if they're not going to manage teams, even if they're not going to be in leadership, it's really important to know what good looks like, because then we have options. Then we can make suggestions about how to improve, or we can decide that actually we don't fit and we'd rather go and work somewhere else. So that's the sort of the kind of management and leadership part of the training. And then the other two parts of the training are firstly the classic kind of employability content, so CVs, applications, interviews. I provide some training around what the workplace looks like now in terms of flexible, remote and hybrid working, especially because a lot of the women we work with haven't been in work during the pandemic, so they don't always realize how much things have changed and the potential to negotiate those sorts of working patterns now. And then the final part of the training is around what I would call curating your work-life blend. So really thinking about how much of your time and energy you can put into work. Are we talking about full-time? Very rarely, I have to say. Are we talking about full-time? Are we talking about 2 days a week, 3 days a week? What does that look like? And also trying to sort of shift the mindset. We do some work where we're trying to shift the mindset of the women a little bit, rather than feeling like they're beggars and can't be choosers, just taking a bit of time for themselves to really think about what it is they want to get out of work, what can they offer in terms of their transferable skills, but also what do they want ideally, and then they can start to use that as a sort of benchmark to evaluate job ads and job opportunities against. Because I think what women often do in this situation is there's all these jobs out there and they're kind of like, yeah, I could do that, but it's not really, you know, firing me up, or oh, yeah, I could do that, but it's not really the salary that I want. And so once you kind of have a bit of a checklist and the priorities, then you can actually go for quantity rather than quality. Because I think taking a bit more time to really apply for something that really gets you excited, where you can really kind of convey your passion and your interest, is ultimately going to be more successful than chucking in your CV and hoping that they're not going to ask you to do 36 hours a week, which I think is often what happens.
Yeah. So how long?
And everything. Sorry.
How
long? The program runs for 5 or 6 weeks, depending on when we run it. We sometimes have a break in the middle just to accommodate school holidays, and it's 2 training sessions a week in the mornings. The trainings it's online, it's run in small groups, that the groups are normally around 15 women. We find that works really well because they get to know each other. It's all peer-led, so our whole ethos is that the women learn at least as much from each other as they do from us, because they all have useful, valid experience, you know, positive and negative. And then there's a wraparound program around the training, which includes mentoring. The women are all, we put them into Teams channels so they can communicate with each other and start to get used to using Teams, which a lot of them have never used, or they've only ever used for homeschooling. We run masterclasses on topics that we know are of interest, but are maybe not core to the program. So we've run them on things like freelancing, on working with purpose, on working in the third sector, on starting your own business, that sort of thing. And the women can keep in touch with us for as long as they want to or need to. So we have an all alumni Teams channel where they can interact with women beyond their group, and they can do that for as long as they need. And then a lot of them also join my Facebook community, so they're getting a lot more, they're seeing more job opportunities, and they're getting a lot of intel around like flexible working and the sort of state of flexible working, just to, I think, encourage them that what they're looking for isn't a unicorn. And I know you often post jobs in the group as well. So.
No, they are coming more and more. Do you know, it's funny because I started working for myself on Flex, and then as soon as I started doing what I do, there's been so many more jobs than I thought existed. I think you just sort of need to know where to look and also to ask for it. There's a lot of jobs.
Definitely.
Mention flexible working, but actually employers are more open to discussing it and offering it than maybe you think. So
I think that process of really prioritizing what it is that we're looking for, even if, you know, it might be a sector, it might not, it might just be something like, I want to work for an organization that's got a really good reputation of flexible working, for example, or and then just really kind of trying to focus in on that. That means that then that's what you're talking to people about. That's what you're Googling for. So the algorithms start to line up. And, you know, I don't personally think it's like the stars and the moon are lining up. I think it's just the algorithms and the people around you. But I think often the women I work with, they're too scared to just voice, or actually, I think I'd quite like to do this. And a lot of our conversations are around just kind of building up their confidence and just sort of saying, well, ask a couple of people about it. You know, I'll connect the women to people I know. So just have a conversation. You're not committing yourself to anything. But I think, you know, when you've been out of the workplace for a long time, it's quite difficult to just sort of make that first step.
So you've had 100 people do it. So what's been the success rate of those? Out of those 100, how many people have gone on to find roles?
Yeah, so we've been providing training since the start of last year. So we piloted it in early 2021, and we had a bit of a break, and then we've been running cohorts regularly since last October. And we just did a sort of longitudinal survey, and 65% of the women who came back to us said they were either in work or actively applying. And of the others, well, some didn't get back to us, but for the others, the timing's not quite right. So some women will be waiting till their kids transition into some kind of childcare or schooling. Some women, we all have different things that go on in our lives that kind of throw us a curveball. Some women have gone on to further training or into education. They might be reskilling somehow. And some women will be thinking through starting up their own business, but maybe not actively working just yet. Yes. So, so it's pretty good. And,
implanted.
Yeah, exactly. And our outcomes are around building confidence, building work readiness, and building understanding of the benefits of flexible working to both the employee and the employer. So, we're just kind of, like you say, we're planting seeds, and we don't expect the women to sort of walk into a job as soon as they finish the training, although some do. Everybody's at a different stage.
Yeah. So your program obviously runs just in Scotland. Would you know of any, there might be people watching this that are in England, Wales, Northern Ireland? Do you know of any similar programs?
Yeah, there are similar programs. So the UK government was funding women returners programs for a while. I know that the charity Pregnant Then Screwed runs one up in, I think, Yorkshire and the Northeast.
Oh, okay.
And there's a company called Women Returners, and they run women returners programs, as you would expect. What they tend to do, which is quite different to what we do, is they tend to help women back into a similar career to the one they had. So they tend to work with professional women, and they tend to work in sectors like financial services. I think they also do sort of accounting and those sorts of sectors. There are also STEM returners programs. So one of our women has got a job. She came through our program and then got a job with the STEM returners program in engineering. And fortunately for her, she lives in Aberdeen. The job she got was in Bristol. And then the project she was due to work on got scrapped, and she's been reallocated to a project in Edinburgh, which is much more convenient for hybrid working than Bristol. And I'm trying to think what else I'm aware of. I know there's bits and pieces. We had a woman from Northern Ireland contact us recently wanting to get something going there.
Okay.
So I mean, we would absolutely be up for expanding. It's really a question of finding the right partners and the right funding, because unfortunately, although on paper a lot of the women we support probably could pay to participate, they won't. It's really hard, I think, for women on a career break to think about putting themselves first and to invest in their own career and in their own, what we're doing is much bigger than just getting women back into work. It's about helping them create that work-life blend that includes work, but it includes all the other things in their life. And it's quite a broad process.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got women returners, Pregnant and Screwed, women in STEM. Was it women in STEM or STEM
returners? STEM returners.
I was even at the links. And so you're funded by the Scottish Government. I'm just wondering if there's any employers, Scottish employers watching this. Would you ever be open to sort of sponsorship or support with employers?
Yeah, totally open to sponsorship. So, and also really happy to speak to employers. So I'm really happy to share job ads as long as they've got some kind of flexibility or they're part-time, because more than 90% of the women who come through the program just don't want full-time work. Mm-hmm. Really happy for employers to engage with our women. So, we've had employers come along to masterclasses and talk about their organizations and the kinds of work that they offer. I'm really happy to talk to employers if they want to better understand women returners. I think we did a piece of research at the start of the year with a number of employers in Scotland, and we were quite surprised that a lot of them kind of assumed that women returners were women coming back from mat leave, and hadn't really thought about all the women who are out there who are no longer employed, who aren't on maternity leave, and who want to come back into the workplace, which was quite interesting. So they weren't necessarily, they were only thinking of their own returners and not necessarily about women they could recruit in who'd never worked for them before.
Okay.
And I think, you know, the labour market's really tight just now. Employers need to be thinking a bit more creatively and thinking about where they can find talent that they've previously not been able to reach. And for women returners, that flexibility and that broader sort of inclusive culture is just really, really important. And, you know, frankly, I'm saying to women returners, if it doesn't feel inclusive and they can't offer you flexibility, just don't bother, you know, because it's never going to work.
No, there are plenty of employers now that do. So why should employers consider somebody that's had a career break?
I think because nobody forgets what they've already learned, you know, so the women still have the skills that they learned in the workplace, and they've gained a lot of skills while they're out of the workplace. There's some research done by Microsoft about how parents are better at managing time and better at multitasking. Also, I think women who've had a career break, whatever the reason for their career break, it's not gone away. So they have got a razor sharp focus on what they need to do at work, because there's no compromise. You can't just like leave your kid at the school gate, or, you know, not take your mum to her doctor's appointment, or take care of your own health, or whatever it might be. So they'll get the job done. And the women I work with are often they've got lots of work experience, lots of life experience. They've often got quite broad skills because they've often been in managerial roles. And so I think particularly for smaller organizations, or organizations, for example, in the third sector, they bring a really fresh perspective, because they bring all that experience into a new context, so they can help innovate, they can help find new ways of doing things. And, you know, I'm often thinking about sort of startups where you actually need somebody who can wear several hats, or
somebody really in a startup.
Exactly.
And is all right to do a bit, who's not too focused. I only do, not too precious about only doing X. You actually sort of
exactly. And I think if an employer can kind of set some boundaries around that, because women returners don't want jobs that are called part-time 28 hours that actually turn into 40-hour weeks. You know, if you can kind of design a job and put some boundaries around it, I think employers can get so much out of women returners, because they want to work, and often they want to learn, because they want that kind of mental stimulation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm nodding my head. And how can they support somebody that's maybe returning to work after a break? Is there anything you'd recommend they do?
Yeah, I think it's important. Well, I think the big one is flexible working or part-time working. Just, you know, thinking about how a job can be done in a way that isn't necessarily all the time in the office, or isn't necessarily full-time. They need to make sure that their jobs are what I would call human sized. So not this kind of full-time job in a part-time job's clothing. So that's just a recipe for burnout. But I think also it's helpful if those structures exist to maybe buddy women up with a mentor, or a woman who's kind of a bit further ahead in the organization, just to sort of smooth some of those pathways and help her rebuild some of the relationships. And also just keep the conversation going. You know, I think we see this in the broader flexible working debate, that there are a lot of assumptions being made about what works for people that are just nonsense. You know, I mean, like the 4-day week, for example. There will be people out there who think, 4-day week, that's flexible, that'll do for for working mums. And in actual fact, if it's 5 days of work crammed into 4, I mean, personally, as a working mum, that sounds like a nightmare. So keep those conversations open and be open-minded about how the work can be done. I think, the pandemic has shown us that people can be productive outside of the office, that they can do the work that they're entrusted to do. So just kind of, I think, my message for employers would be just to try and keep hold of some of that learning and that innovation that's happened in the last couple of years, and use it to build more inclusive workplaces.
And what would be your top tips to somebody looking for a new job after a career break, thinking about returning to work? What advice would you give to them?
I would say think really carefully about your transferable skills, because you might be quite surprised at the doors that they could open. You don't have to go back into the sector or the business that you were working in before if that's not what you want to do now. Think really carefully about what you can and can't compromise on. Don't go into an interview without thinking, okay, if they offer me it and it's full-time, what am I going to do? Or, if you would prefer to do 3 days a week, but you could push to 4, think really carefully about what your sort of negotiation strategy is going to be. Think about what the business is and what they need, because even the organization that's most open to flexible working still needs to deliver on its bottom line. So think about, what you can and can't negotiate on. And I would also say, do your research, look into any company or organization you're thinking of applying to, find out what it's like to work there. Try and dig somebody up on LinkedIn or through your networks who works there, or look on Glassdoor, or there are all these new kind of employer review sites and apps coming through now. Just try and find out what it's like to work there. And if you don't think they're going to be able to give you what you need, don't waste your time. Put all your time and effort into, adapting your CV, adapting your application for the ones that you really can see yourself doing.
Yeah. We've had a question. I can answer this after you, but Claire said, why do we only assume that working mums work part-time rather than working parents?
Well, statistically, that's the case.
Yeah.
But and because of all these, structures and things that we were talking about earlier, often families, if we're talking about the sort of stereotypical family, then often it's the man that goes back to work and keeps increasing his wage, and the woman who puts her career on hold. I mean, it doesn't need to be like that. And increasingly, I think it isn't. I mean, I think what's really interesting is we've never really had a public conversation about what a lot of couples do, which is once they've had a child, they both go back to work 4 days a week. And, that's been going on since long before the pandemic, but it was never really a sort of big public conversation, because I think people negotiated it with the employers they were with. And what we're seeing now is people want to start jobs on a flexible basis.
Yeah.
But there's no reason why men can't work part-time. It's just kind of not the way it's been done. Sorry?
There's more companies doing 4-day weeks as well, which will benefit. But I mean, statistically, women do twice as much in a heterosexual couple, childcare, domestic duties, etc. So, until that's balanced at home, then women do need flexible working more than men. But I still agree with you. I think we need that balance at home. So everybody needs to be on board with flexible working and pushing to do that. So then there's the balance at home as well.
And I think, but flexible and part-time working isn't only for women or for mums, but employers who manage to kind of design those working patterns and arrangements in an inclusive way will find that they benefit other groups as well.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of people
want
dealing with
working.
For whatever reason.
Someone says, I prefer the term work pattern plus the right job design in the first place in relation to expected output.
Absolutely.
really think we should move away from working hours and to output. I think that would reduce burnout, give flexibility. I know more employers would consider 4-day weeks and should always recommend reaching out to recruiters to check that.
Yeah, well, there's this big 4-day week experiment going on at the moment, which it would be interesting to see where that lands. And I think a 4-day week won't work for everybody. And a 4-day week means different things to different people, because for some it means compressed hours, for some it means 80% of the time for 100% of the outputs. And I think what I always recommend to the women I work with is, if you're having a conversation around flexible working or alternative working patterns or whatever you might call it, make sure that you're both talking about the same thing. Don't make any assumptions that what you think of as flexible working is also what an employer defines as flexible working, because you need to find something that works for both of you. And I think the point about job design is really important. I think what often happens is somebody leaves a job and the job ad just, the job spec just gets churned back out again without this sort of reflection on whether it really needs to be done like that. And we see that, I think it was Timewise, who are a recruitment company, but also do a lot of research around part-time and flexible working. And Flexibility Works, who are a Scottish organisation working with employers to sort of roll out more flexible working. They both did research during the tail end of the pandemic, so last year, and found that around 75% of people were working flexibly in some way. Obviously, a lot of them were working remotely at that point, but only 25% of job ads mentioned the possibility of flexible working. So people are working flexibly, but somehow the job ads are getting out there without those two words it mentioned in them. So there's clearly a bit of a sort of lag or a bit of a mismatch somewhere internally in organisations.
Laziness, they just copy and paste an ad that they were running 3 years ago, the same job, and then
and
Claudia's
just because
as I say, Claudia's made an interesting point. She said in other countries men do have better paternity leave and go to job shares, but she said in the UK she doesn't think many fathers go part-time. Her husband's job hasn't changed one iota, and she wonders if husbands work more to compensate for a wife on a career break, which is a really interesting point. Possibly. Because they do say there's a penalty, but then they often on the fathers, but like.
I think what the Fatherhood Institute did some interesting research during the pandemic about the impact for fathers of having time at home. So either because they were working from home or because they were on furlough. And there was some really, they produced a video about it, and there were some really beautiful stories of fathers building a better connection with their children. And I think that is starting to feed through, and dads are starting to realize that there's a different way to parent, basically, and it doesn't have to be that they leave the house before anybody else has had breakfast and come home when the kids are in bed. And I really think that, as you were saying, Liz, nothing's going to change until we all get behind it. I think with anything, if it's seen as an issue that only affects a small proportion of the population, like half of the population, then it kind of gets pigeonholed. That's just an issue for women. But if more and more dads are kind of taking the paternity leave, the culture is changing so that they feel able to take that paternity leave, they feel able to ask for part-time, then it will have a ripple effect. But I think we're in a bit of a messy middle just now, because we're as a society, we're kind of reeling from all the changes during the pandemic, and it hasn't all kind of settled down yet. But there was some research done, I think it was just published this week by Pregnant and Screwed, around dads wanting to be able to spend more time with their kids and wanting to take paternity leave and wanting paternity leave to be longer. So things are changing. It's just always so glacial.
Yeah, brilliant. So we've got some last comments. So if anyone's got any further questions for Lynn, do let us know. I'll read through the last comments and then we can maybe talk about where people can find you, connect with you, join the Facebook group. So Hayley says recruitment is nuts at the minute. It is, and although it isn't ideal to republish old adverts, sometimes you do it to get it out. And that's why she thinks people should focus on organisations they would like to work for and investigate if they're a match and pursue opportunities directly. Yeah, really good point, Hayley. Someone else has said she thinks we need, or they think we need more male power part-timers in Timewine's annual list. And then Noella said it takes a village for anything to have an impact, but there is definitely some hope. And then Claudia said not many husbands share the load at home, so often women return and struggle as still doing all the housework, children's homework, chores, etc. Let's hope things get better. So
I think things are getting better because men have seen it now. They've been at home with us.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you for everybody that's commented today, everybody that's watched. Any final questions for Lynn, please pop them in the comments. But Lynn, how can people connect with you, find you, learn more about how to join the course, how to support the course, and how to join the Facebook group?
So for more about making work for women returners, the returners program, our website is makingwork.scot, and we are also on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. The Facebook community is called Flexible Working Scotland. So that's aimed at people based in Scotland looking for flexible part-time or remote work. So basically anything other than the 9 to 5 at the employer's premises. But if you have jobs, you're welcome to advertise them in the group. At the moment, that's free of charge. If you're just interested in learning more about flexible working, I post a lot of intel and information about the sort of state of the debate around flexible working. And I'm on LinkedIn if you want to connect there. I'm Lynn Houmdi. So yeah, I think that's all the bases.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for such a brilliant chat. I've really enjoyed it. Loads of comments. So it seems like people have enjoyed it as well. Claudia says, thanks, very interesting. So thank you so much, Lynn, for your time.
Thanks to you.
Thank you so much to everybody that's watched today, that's commented today, that's got involved. It's been a really interesting conversation. And I will see you all next week. But thank you so much, Lynn.
Thanks, and thanks for all the comments. It's nice to know there's people out there engaging. Yeah. We're not talking to ourselves.
I know, definitely makes this a better conversation when people get involved. So thank you. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.